how I got the idea to write this book really starts a long time ago. Well, first of all, I've been working in the IT industry for the last 20 years. I used to be a manager at American companies like Oracle. I used to be vice president of companies like Salesforce.com. And I also owned and started my own company to help American companies set up their operations throughout Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I became an expert of emerging markets. So throughout my professional career, I developed these companies throughout all of Africa, for example, Eastern Europe after the collapse of the Soviet bloc, and the Middle East while it started to develop. So obviously, that international experience enabled me to see the world as it really is and not as it looks from the window or of the TV of a very nice and rich country like Switzerland or the United States or any other European country. So seeing the world as it is made me realize, of course, that the world is a tough place. It's full of violence, it's full of hatred, it's full of harshness to women, to children, to weak people. And that was something that made me think about the fragility of today's world. Another element that made me think about what is the state of the world we live in is that throughout all these emerging markets, the level of pollution and the level of usage of resources is just huge. You don't see it here. You don't see it in developed countries. You don't see dumps. You don't see the garbage and the poisonous drops of chemical tanks and poisonous products. You just see the end product that is finished. You don't see child labor. You don't see dead people in the streets like I've seen in Africa. You don't see civil wars, at least not yet. So the difference between what I was used to see in my day-to-day life at home and what I would see when I was working in those emerging markets was so powerful in my mind that really forced me to put things into question. And at the time, in the 90s especially, the general idea was that the whole world would develop to become like us, to become peaceful, very civilized, very happy, and where everybody would love each other. And I started to question that concept and that ideology. And actually, I started to realize that probably it would be the opposite way. Our world is extremely peaceful and civilized in a way because we've had incredible wealth generated by access to very cheap energy sources, mostly coal, but obviously oil. And I started to think that perhaps with the scarcity of those resources, and I started to check numbers and see that that would be the case, well, maybe our world would start to become more and more like the world that I've seen, that is brutal, harsh, and without pity and without compassion. And that was a very important element into making me realize that things may not be what they look. Another element was, of course, traveling. I remember this flight one night from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and as the plane was approaching Los Angeles, I could see for almost 1 hour lights and streets and motorways lit up with people driving, and I was just thinking of all these millions of people driving to work and to do their business every day, consuming billions of gallons of fuel every day in one city that was lit up like a Christmas tree for hundreds of miles, hundreds of square miles. And I was just thinking, well, that's one big city, and how many thousands of cities in the world are like that? And how many billions of people are just consuming voraciously energy, oil, metals, ore of all kinds throughout the world. And obviously, I started to check data because my background is scientific. So I just wouldn't trust my feelings. I went to deep data. There, I could see that indeed resources are becoming scarce, and our consumption rate keeps growing because more and more people are accessing consumption. More and more people want to consume as the rich countries people do. Um, we do not dream to live like a farmer in Mali. People around the world dream to live like an American, like an Englishman, like a Frenchman. People in China, they don't dream to stay poor and close to nature. They want to live in the big city with big cars, with big TV. And it's the same for Indians, it's the same for Indonesians, it's the same for Nigerians, for Brazilians. Hey, and who are we to deny that dream to them? But that dream comes at the cost of depleting the whole world's resources. And I understood that, and I could check the facts, I could check the data. And I tell you, even with the latest news about shale gas and non-conventional oil, all of this is never going to be enough. In the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to deplete completely our natural resources. And if you think that the byproduct of all that is pollution, which eventually may lead to some global climate change, well, we are in deep, deep trouble. So in around 2005, I had the conviction, I was fully convinced that this was happening. And I started to think how I could live in a different way to save myself and my family. So I thought about living outside the city, being in the countryside. I thought of buying a farm, which I bought, and started to train and retrain my skills from international marketing to more and more self-defense, self-sufficiency, gardening, and so on. And while I was doing that, a lot of my friends and a lot of people that were quite wealthy in the industry and some friends of my family started to look at that and say, well, look, it's interesting what you do. How about you come to me and tell me what's wrong with my life, what's wrong with my house? Is it a house that I can live in self-sufficient mode? So I went to a few of them. Some of them are living in Switzerland, some are in the United States, some are in France, some are in Israel. And I started to say to them, well, look, yeah, here you have some problems. You cannot defend yourself. You are not self-sufficient in terms of water. Have you thought about generating your electricity from your solar panels or wind, whatever? And then some of them, told me, look, I'm willing to pay for that. So obviously I was doing that on weekends as I was still working for IT companies, for software companies. And eventually I did that as a consultant. And I I stopped working in the industry to become again my own consultant to these people. And as I was doing that, I was documenting everything to take my notes. And one day I met a French author, which I think also understands and understood exactly the same problems of the world that I did. And he said to me, look, I happen to own a publisher in France, co-owner, a publisher. How about we publish a book about what you're doing? And I said, well, that's great because I just have notes. So in early 2011, I started to put these notes down in a book. And late 2011, the book came out in France, in French, in Switzerland. And we were extremely surprised by the success. I was really expecting this book to be a non-event. It was just for me an interesting idea to put down and tell other people what I was doing and why I think everyone can make it. But while we printed 3,000 copies, we were overwhelmed that the 3,000 copies basically sold in a week. And the book became one of the top 50 bestsellers in France. And we were appalled in a good way. We were surprised by the incredible demand. So I was asked to do conferences around France. I must have done in 2012 about 60 conferences in France, Switzerland, and Belgium, and even in Quebec and Canada. And not only the success in terms of sales was great, and again, it was a best-selling book. It was #1 best-selling book in economics books in France for 2011. But more importantly, it showed that people were really interested. And maybe the angle, my approach to how you switch your life to a more self-sufficient one with the concept of a sustainable autonomous base, is a more holistic, a more complete approach to the typical survivalist or prepper approach that you would have traditionally in the United States. And I think that explains the success of the book. And people could find answers to problems that either they would instinctively feel, or that they would see and read every day in the news or in books they would read. I don't pretend to have invented anything completely new, but certainly a different approach to the solutions to today's world problems.